Welcome to Here Where You Belong, your go-to podcast for exploring belonging with your host and belonging expert, Dea Irby. We are thrilled to have you join us. Together, we'll dive into the depths of what it means for each of us to find our own place in the world, whether it's within our communities, our relationships, or within ourselves. Today's episode is meant to inspire, uplift, and remind you that no matter where you are or where you're headed, you have a place where you truly belong. So grab a cozy spot and settle in. Welcome to Here Where You Belong.
Hello, awesome belongers. Welcome home to Here Where You Belong podcast. Today's guest says that we've been asking the wrong question all along. Not why do you do what you do, but who are you really? I'm Dea, your host. Get ready to be inspired and blessed. Help me welcome today's guest, David Ask. Hey, David.
What's going on, Dea? Just glad to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
So glad you are here. Well, let me tell you a little bit more about our guest. David Ask is an entrepreneur, an inventor, and that's an exciting product, and lead coach for the True North Resiliency Program, where he helps individuals and families discover something foundational, yet often overlooked: who they are. From building a simple thermostat guard into a product found in over 3,700 retail stores to now focusing on people development, David's journey has been shaped by perseverance, clarity, and purpose. His upcoming book, yay, Guardians of Grit, is focused on helping fathers raise strong, uncrushable sons by anchoring them in identity and direction. Ooh, that's going to be a thriller. Because he believes who you are shapes everything that follows. David, any additions, subtractions, or corrections?
No. I think that's great. Thanks for the kind introduction. You know what? I just say we just jump in here. This is, this is about your audience, right? This is about, some shared wisdom and shared experiences and things to help lift your audience up and to give them some more tools and paradigms to live and love better. So yeah, I'm just glad to be here.
Love that, and I appreciate it. It is on brand with what you're all about, is thinking about the listeners.
Yeah.
So the reason you're here is because I feel like you have some interesting belonging story to tell us, or stories, either how you found it or how you've provided it for other people. So take it away.
Well, truth of the matter is when I saw your show, there's just the word belong is so important. It's one of those things that, the opposite of that is just awful. When someone feels like they don't belong, right? That you are not welcome here, and is so heart-wrenching. In fact, just the opposite is true. My buddy Chris Eaton, he's a British songwriter. He's the guy that wrote the song "Breath of Heaven" for Amy Grant, and like a bunch of hits, right? Well, he also wrote a song that has never been cut before, I don't think, and I'd like to record it at some point. It's called "Welcome Home." And it's an entire song about, and there's a line in that says, "You belong here, welcome home." And I'll need to send this to you because when you listen to it, you'll just weep. And because that truth, that thread that runs through every human soul of you are not only welcome here, but you belong here is so important. It's so needed. And, the value that you're placing on someone, when they walk into a room or something is just amazing when they sense, I'm glad to see you and you belong here. In fact, I remember my grandparents and Lisa's grandparents and my parents for that matter too, but acutely, right? Just, what are you doing? Get in here, tell me all about it. Like they were just so interested in us young people, whether that was teens or, early married life and so on. And I'm like, what do you mean? Tell you all about what? But they didn't even care. They were just so interested in us and loving us. And so anyway, I love talking about, just this entire concept as you do.
Right. Well, that's fabulous. And it hurts to think there's so many people that have never, ever at any point had that experience.
Yeah.
So do you feel like that was what you had forever?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm grateful. In fact, I remember growing up, we had I had our house was, Grand Central Station for, my friends and a bunch of people, right? And my mom and dad were such fine examples of welcoming people. And I mean, my mom and dad would hug my friends and what are you doing and just love on them. And they were so genuine about it. And it was fascinating for, years later, people still comment on the fact that your house was so different. And, we were, I didn't get that anywhere, just to your point. And, so, here we are, my wife and I've been married 27 years and we try to do the same thing in our home, right? If you walk into our house, we're going to be, welcoming you with open arms and love on you and be interested in you because people like us do things like that.
Right, right. Well, it's obviously a generational norm.
Yeah.
That's how you were taught to live.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. There was one point in one time in our moving, I don't even know how many people had a key to our house.
Yeah.
I woke up one morning and one of my son's friends was in the kitchen fixing breakfast for one of my younger children.
Yeah. That's so
So
great.
that's but the world, why is that missing?
Obviously we live in a broken world. So on a very, basic level, everything is broken. And in fact, we would need to acknowledge it's broken severely, for so many in this world. I mean, life is not only not kind, it's just brutal. So, so we have a broken nature, right? It's, we often, we have to fight back this idea of, it's me over you. And so I think that, to kind of get a bit, theological here, and kind of a macro view of things, the upside down kingdom, right? I heard one of my professors say that years ago is what? The upside down kingdom, and I'm a Christian, is the all powerful God, right, coming in the flesh and taking a seat on the floor so that we would have a seat at the table. And that is so antithetical to, especially in our culture now where, social media and all the stuff, it's like I'm looking good, I'm looking better than you, I'm comparing myself to everybody, I'm climbing the corporate ladder, I'm going to step on everybody that I can along the way, that kind of thing. So on a macro level, right, we're just really screwed up. And so I think that but here's the funny thing, right? We think in a moment that a kindness, a welcoming spirit, a hug, right, a touch, like, hey, I'm so glad you're sitting in my living room right now. That's the kind of stuff, though, that changes people's lives. And you know
Absolutely.
what I mean? It opens their hearts and their minds, to what is this? I just tasted something that was eternal, and you can't get away from it.
Hmm.
And so I think that, that hospitality, as it were, this idea of just belonging is a secret weapon. You can unlock someone's heart in years of hurt and disillusionment and fragmentation and, sorrow with just by looking across the table at somebody and grabbing their forearm and saying, "Hey, dude, I'm really, really honored that you are sitting in my living room right now. Like you're sitting at my table, and I'm so glad you're here. And what an honor to have you here." And it's, to acknowledge that that person, is made in the image of God, the one who made lightning and hurricanes and Neptune and tornadoes and koala bears, says what? I have made you in my image, and you are my inheritance, and I am yours. So,
Mm.
so this idea of priceless preciousness in a simple moment can be just an acknowledgement. I'm really glad you're sitting here, and I can't wait to get to know you. And it changes everything.
I love that. That's beautifully stated. In all the years of being that open and caring and welcoming person, have you, has it gone sideways? Have you been hurt?
Sure. Yeah. It's funny. I
That's
think,
sort of
yeah.
rhetorical, but tell me about it, how you deal with. Some people, the reason they're not is because they're afraid to be vulnerable.
Oh, absolutely. And one thing I'm realizing, you've heard, phrases like, desperate people do desperate things, right?
Yes,
And
hurt
you've
people hurt people.
exactly. But you know what? I think it is way more true than we would want to realize. In fact, yesterday I was talking to a colleague in a separate business, and I've got some real estate investments going on right now. And it's a challenge. We're building three homes, we're scraping a house and putting up three in its place and all that kind of stuff. And he made a comment that was kind of underhanded or like kind of a dig, and it kind of shocked me. I was like, wow, that was not expected.
Ouch.
Yeah, and at the same time, it was one of those things where I'm like, wow, I wonder what's going on in his life, right? Because there might be something desperate there, and it's not like him to do that. And so, in fact, just the opposite. It's usually that person in my life is, David, man, I see you swinging for the fence all the time. I know you're carrying a lot right now, and I just want you to know I'm really proud of you. That's the kind of stuff I usually get. And
Mhm.
so to receive just the opposite of that, I'm like, well, there's a clue. There's something going on there.
Yeah. How you were listening to him makes a difference. We have different kinds of listenings, and the different listenings are for different situations. And I mean, if you're listening to fix somebody, that's not what they need. If they just need to, you need to listen to hear
Yeah.
and be present.
Yeah.
Um, or listening for information instead of, details instead of where their heart is. So
I
kudos to
love
you
I
for
love
that.
that. And I think when I was doing some coaching training, there's they call it like the third level of listening. Like you're reading between the lines. You're hearing what is not said.
Right.
And I think again, that takes not only a bit of maybe some training, but you know what? It takes a bit of, and I'm not saying this to toot my horn because I can get, my feelings hurt in a real hurry, but it takes a bit of maturity to position yourself, as the observer of what's happening, as opposed to this idea of I am my own thoughts right now, and there's this, very linear given, giving and taking, that kind of stuff. So to have a maturity to step over to the side and view that conversation a bit more analytically and maturely is takes some time to develop that. And it's
Right.
a and so, but at the same time, we all know if we can tap the brakes and step aside and look at something a bit more, analytically, there's a lot more going on with everybody.
Right. Right. Yes. I meet all kinds of people all the time. And sometimes you just have to just, mm-hmm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm. They they don't want you to say anything. They just,
right.
oh, and just be present,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's part of the belonging. Um, how do you have a story about providing belonging to someone specifically? I mean, you can change the names to protect the guilty, but you know,
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. Yeah, I'll share just a quick story. And actually, you know what? I'm going to share a different one here. I'm sitting at a desk right now that was built by my friend's dad. So, I don't think he would care that I shared this, but about 5 years ago, I think it was probably during COVID and everything else, I wanted a standing desk. So I'm sitting on a stool right now, but I can stand and work, and I often do here at this desk. And what was fascinating at the time, a friend of mine he was just having a really hard time, like, thinking suicidal thoughts and, just all kinds of stuff. And he had taken some medicine that kind of messed up his system and this and that. And so for I don't know, probably the better portion of a year, he and I talked almost every single day. And quite often I'd say, "Hey, dude, get over here. Get in the car and come over here. Sit in my living room." And it was neat because, we talked earlier about the power of one's environment. Well, if I got him out of his environment and into, I'll put it, into my environment, which I think is pretty bright
safer.
and joyful
Mhm.
and safer and right, it because we're kind of Pavlovian on a lot of levels, right? We get triggers and this and that. Well, long story short, he is not only doing a lot better, but his parents, who I knew not as well, were at their wits' end. They didn't know how to help their 40-year-old son who was going through a midlife crisis and didn't want to live anymore. And you know what? I didn't know how to help him, right? I'm not a doctor. I might be the best
Right.
friend anybody's ever had, but I knew a couple of things. I'm going to show up, right? Because that's what we do. I'm going to ask great questions, and I'm just going to give him a hug and say I love you. I'm not going anywhere. And so after that year, I was talking with him about building a desk, and he goes, "Well, my dad does stuff like that." And so I talked to his dad, and his dad, "Well, what do you want?" He came over and took measurements and everything, and he built me this beautiful desk. And they came up in my office is upstairs in a home we built, and put it together and this and that. And as he's leaving, I'm like, well, and I never talked to him about the price. I'm like, well, what do I owe you? And man, he turns around and he wraps his arms around me and he says, David, he said, you walked with my son through the valley of the shadow of death, and he's doing better now. And he said, I can't thank you enough. He said, there's no charge. So I'll be honest, every time
You're gonna make me cry.
well, me too, right? So many times I step up to this desk. Not only does it remind me of the fact that love is literally can have the power over death, right? It's something where I don't know what I'm doing, but guess what? I'm going to show up. I'm going to listen. I'm going to make sure he knows he's valued, and I'm not going anywhere.
Mm,
And it's so this is kind of this, this stone of remembrance, as it were, where I'm like,
yes,
you know what? I'm never going to get rid of this desk because it showed that somebody as flawed and goofy and inconsistent as David Osk can move a mountain. God uses, people like me and you and everybody else to change everything for somebody. And that's what it's about, right?
absolutely. And I'm glad you said your last name. I forgot to make sure I
Oh,
pronounced
no,
it right.
no worries. It's
Ask,
it's
not
spelled like
ask.
ask,
It's
but it's
spelled
it's
like ask, but
yeah.
it's more British. Ask.
Well, it's a town in Norway named Osk, in fact. So
Okay, so there's
yeah,
the
but
story.
yeah,
Not to shift a mood from that
yeah,
touching story, but that is, and we don't do that because often for multiple reasons. One is that we don't take the time.
yeah,
That took a commitment of time on your part with no guarantee of any, or you didn't know you were going to end up with a desk. You didn't know that
yeah.
a whole year would go by and he would be better.
Yeah, and what's neat too, it's been a few years. In fact, my son is 21 years old and runs a moving business, a junk removal business, a hauling business, like he's doing all kinds of stuff. And this friend actually hired my son this morning, and they had such a wonderful exchange. He actually gave my son guitar lessons back in the day, and you know, it's fascinating how, things, the touch points, right, that keep coming. It's amazing.
The life on life.
Yeah.
And that's what the early church was about.
Yeah.
That's why they would share their belongings. It wasn't like a quota that was called out for them to meet. It was they were in someone's life and they knew they needed something, so they shared it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful, beautiful image of a body. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the arm is supporting the leg, and the leg is supporting like everything. It's just like they're so
Every part.
woven together. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I think this is a good place to pause because we're going to take a break and be right back with the fabulous David Osk. Be right back. Hey there! Isn't my guest amazing? So glad you joined us today. In this world that often feels disconnected, building community and fostering belonging are essential. That's why I created this podcast to bring inspiring people to you, to encourage you to create that sense of belonging and community, no matter where you are. If you're being blessed by my guest, and we have some more, like, subscribe, and share this podcast. You know who needs to hear this. Stay connected, stay true to yourself, and always remember you belong. Now, back to our amazing guest. And we are back with the fabulous David Osk. And if you've ever listened to my podcast on the second half, which you should, I asked 3 questions, my 3 favorite questions, and David is no exception. He gets the 3 questions too. The first question is, what do you consider is your greatest accomplishment? Now, that may be hard for you to choose of all the things you've done, but let
Oh
me hear what
gosh.
you have to say.
You know what? I think most parents, right? Your goal in life, and my well, how about this? My first responsibility is to my wife. and then my children, right? She comes first, and they're gonna leave me one day. And if Lisa and I are not in a great spot, then we can't be great parents. So we were very, very intentional about making sure that our marriage was front and center, not only because it's the right thing to do and for our own joy, but because it's the best way to raise kids, right? If I say
An
that I love my,
example of how,
yeah,
yes.
right. And it's fascinating. If I say that I love my kids, but I'm not loving my wife, I'm really not loving them. So I would say, you know, to answer your question, right? I've got two amazing children, and I say children, they're whatever, 19 and 21. And my daughter just yesterday, we moved her home from her first year in college, and
Ooh,
she is a fabulous human being. It's
doesn't that just
fascinating.
bless your heart?
Yeah, I mean, she's, 5'2" or 5'3", cute little blonde, and I could go on and on about, like the icing on the cake, which I tell her. Like she was, first chair violinist at Vanderbilt University Children's. She won the concerto competition and got to play at the Schermerhorn Symphony Center a 20-minute solo, of Tchaikovsky. She has played on stages with me where we had to sign non-disclosure agreements. We can't even talk about it. And yet, you know what? She is wise. She is disciplined. She is kind. She's forgive me, I get choked up here, but she's the kind of person who finds the loneliest one in every room. And I just,
Wonder where she got that.
yeah. And to see the heart of God in her is stunning.
Mm.
And my son is, I mean, he looks like a Greek god. He's 21 years old and he's a little mini me, and and at the same time Parker is the same, he's got all that, fight and whatever vigor and all the stuff going on as a 21-year-old dude, but at the same time he is a kind and noble man. And even today he told me he talked with a customer. He was helping somebody move, and they made some comment about a box that brought up bad memories or something. And the fact that Parker got to like sit and talk with this person about bad memories, and he's hired as a young guy to just move their stuff, right? And he's out there just loving people. And
Mm.
so I could not be more, proud of my kids. And um, and again, I like how one of my favorite quotes, and actually I'll just kind of butcher it this way, is Dostoevsky says, that humans are a mixed bag of contradictions every day. So at best, right? We show up as heroes maybe 20% of the time. Another 40% of the time we're kind of consistent and do our thing, and then there's that last portion that's just like, good night. Who's
What
that?
a,
Who's that guy? So we just have to acknowledge that. And at the same time, I look back with a wild sense of humility because I know that I'm human. And so to see my kids, thriving and loving people and, being on mission and pushing back against, temptation and nonsense. And I'm just so grateful. It's not to say that they're not going to falter and have bad seasons and whatever else, but
oh, what, they're not people?
right.
They're not
Yeah.
real?
But just to see where they're at right now and launching into life, I'm like, you know what? If I dropped dead right now, they would be just fine.
Yes, that is so comforting. So you've mentioned, well, I know that part of the reason they are who they are today is because you modeled it.
And they have a good
And
mother.
and,
Yeah,
and you married well
I did.
because
I married up.
the mother, I'm serious, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world.
Yeah,
And that's for mothers. Of course,
yeah,
men are trying to do it too, but a man, I mean, they do well. They have to, we have to have the both contributions,
sure.
but they can't be a mother. You know,
No,
you
no,
know, they don't just don't put the Band-Aid on the same way. Here, slap
no.
this thing on there. Oh,
Exactly.
let me help you get, it's just totally different. But I want to go back to another accomplishment which fades in light of this is the invention you made for the thermostat. But what what I picked up on, which was so fun, was that you mentioned something about the parents controlling the temperature in the home. And I've always said that parents are the thermostat. If your kids are acting crazy, the temperature's high, go check the thermostat, the parent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you created this guard for a thermostat and talk about uh,
Yeah.
that in the home. So let's talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that. That's a fun.
Yeah. So actually, it's funny. My brother-in-law, technically the idea was his. He called me one day and he said, David, where do I get a thermostat guard with a combination lock? He said, everybody keeps losing that little key. Well, long story short, he and I went into business together at that point. I came up with the name and did all the sales and everything else, and he helped with the design and all the things. I ended up buying him out, you know, early on. He went on to start a construction company and just did really well. And then I was able to kind of run with this business myself, which was rather fortuitous, honestly. And I came up with invented a new version of it, and now another version recently that I licensed to Linux. But I think what's interesting about setting the temperature, right, is um, ultimately, nothing against women, of course, but I'll be honest, I think that the man should have this posture by mandate that if there is something going wrong in my kingdom with a little k, right? And I
Yeah.
don't care if that's my house or it's the car or I'm at the gas station because I'm standing there, I'm responsible for what's happening because I'm the man in the room. And again, I don't want that to sound kind of weird and over the top, but the opposite of that, the vacuum of passivity, right? If you go right back to the garden, that was the original sin of a masculine, the masculine. Where there's a book called The Silence of Adam. That where not only did he not say anything when Eve went to take a bite, he blamed her and blamed God. And so men in general are
Yeah,
really
mess
good.
up.
Yeah. So again, that sounds a bit heavy. So how about this? What does it look like, when you're sitting in your home and there's just a void of something, right? It's not necessarily bad, but it's not good. What would it look like, for a father, to assess what is happening right now in my home and to say, I want to just take it from here to great. Well, you have to understand where you are first and what great looks like. And what are how about this? What's the foundation underneath what great looks like? Is it just that we're kind of getting along and there's no fighting? Or is it this idea that, hey, dad knows your name, and I'm not talking your real name. Dad knows you and he sees you. He sees what God wove into you before you were born, right? We get the word authenticity from the word author, right? And the word identity, what's that? Well, what do you identify with? What do you write it down? So when you start raising someone, causing them to rise, well, you start introducing them to things like values, right? My core values. What matrix am I making decisions through? But then you
Hmm.
talk about things like convictions. What do you believe is right and wrong? What about virtues? What type of an impact do you want to have? And then you think about strengths and how do you want to apply those things? And what gives you goosebumps, right? What causes your energy to rise? What breaks your heart? What problem do you want to solve? So, as you're not only identifying those things in yourself, and you start identifying those things in, your wife and kids for that matter, well, what are you really doing? You're getting to know someone in order to what? To love them. If you don't know someone, you can't love them. And if I don't know what the difference is between, Parker and Kate and Lisa and whoever else, I can say, "Hey, nice shirt," or "You run fast," or, something like that. Or I can say something like, "Hey, Parker, I want you to know yesterday morning when you got out of bed, I could tell you were kind of battling some stuff. And I love the fact that you stopped, you named it to tame it. You entered into your values and you started making decisions that align with the man that you know you are. And then I saw you, go have an interaction with one of your friends and say something that came from a deep place in you to change, his heart and his mind. I want you to know that's good, right? You're seeing something, you're naming it, you're validating, you're calling it out, and so on. And another thought too is just this idea that I think there's a, I need to find this because a clinical psychologist friend of mine, Dr. Andy Garrett, told me this. He said there's an iteration of the word man in Hebrew that actually means one who turns chaos into order. So
Wow.
I like the fact that it's on a very primal, if that's the word, level, that there should be, if there is chaos, it is the man's responsibility to speak order into the chaos. And so I just think that, okay, temperature. You know what? I'll just speak for myself. I like laughter, right? I like hugs. I like grand thought. I like goals. I like aspiring goals. I like to see what's going on with regards to fear in somebody's life and crush it.
Mm,
And it's that kind of stuff as opposed to what? Well, I guess we need to make dinner and we're going to watch a movie and play video games and rinse and repeat, where nobody's really loving each other, knowing each other, and it's just this you're a human doing and not a human being.
yes. Yes. Mm.
There's a lot there.
There's so much. And like we can do a whole section on, but we don't have time for on how to show up. And that's
Yeah.
what your Guardians of Grit, the
Yeah.
book that's coming out. When is that going to be released?
Well, I'm not sure. We're actually pitching it to publishers right now, so I'm not 100% sure, but I'm hoping this year.
Okay. I know that story. How long did it take you to write it?
It's about 2 years. It was a
Wow.
lot harder than I thought it was going to be. In fact, well, I not only wrote the book, but I have a workbook that goes with it, and then a 365-day journal, with some kind of
Yes.
inspiring prompts and so on.
So it needs to find a home so it can get
Yeah.
out there
Yeah.
because if some of this that we're talking about is promoted and trained and taught and channeled into people
Yeah.
that needs to be out there. We need
Yeah.
more of that.
Yeah.
Okay, we could talk about this question forever and ever and ever. Second question is what makes you feel like you belong?
I would say the for instance, when real quick, you're talking me specifically.
Yes, you.
Okay, so I'm kind of a touchy-feely guy. So I love the fact that that if I walk into a room, a smile, just on face value, no pun intended, is a big deal, right? People in general, we all do. We want to know that, wow, that guy's glad to see me, or that person, you know, and so I think too, on a basic level too, it's really awesome when, depending on the setting, if someone walks up and says, David, what's up, brother? And just, plants a good handshake on you. Or if it's the right setting, gives you a hug. And it's like, man, what are you doing? I'm so glad you're here. So I think a smile and a touch, are just, yeah, super important.
Uh, I like to talk about the science of a smile.
Yeah, oh man.
Do you know when you smile, the physical movement of those muscles releases happy chemicals,
Okay,
dopamine in your
I
mind?
remember hearing that years ago, but that's fantastic. What a great
But here's the
reminder.
other thing. When you smile, when you make eye contact and smile at someone, involuntarily they smile also, which causes what?
Yeah,
Happy chemicals in their brains. So
yeah,
I say you can be a free drug dealer
yeah.
giving out happy chemicals by smiling at people.
That's so great. Isn't that neat? And there's yeah, I mean, on a very
Somebody
practical.
designed it that way.
You're
Mm.
right, exactly. Yeah. Isn't that neat? By the way, I did hear something the other day called the hero pose, that when you raise your arms above your head, like you're cheering, like I won, like you just won a race. If you hold your arms above your head for just a couple of minutes, it literally releases, for men anyway, more testosterone in their system because you feel like a winner, which is kind of fascinating.
That is interesting. So now we're going to see all these men walking
That's
down the
right. Yeah.
sidewalk with their arms up. Yeah, I'm being man.
That's
I'm
right.
more manly, more manly.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so yes, when you feel genuinely welcomed,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
that's when you feel like you belong, and that's Yeah, it's always interesting to because different people have different languages or things that speak to them about belonging.
Right.
Now we're on to our third question. We are making it here. What is, and this is so fun because you're episode 93. I've never had two quotes the same. And,
Okay.
uh, what is your favorite quote?
Yeah, and this has been the last couple of years by Benjamin Disraeli, and he says, "The greatest good you can do for another is not to share with him your riches, but to reveal to him his own." And it's been life-changing for me. Yeah.
That is, sorry about it, so rich.
Yeah.
I mean, to use it. How did you find it, and why is that so life-changing for you?
Again, it goes back to working with Dr. Andy Garrett, a dear friend of mine, and he's the one who introduced that to me. And it was neat because he said, David, he goes, I feel like this is a synopsis of the way you live your life. And and here's what's fascinating though is that he's given me, more tools, as it were, to to understand what do you mean by riches, right? What is that? And so when you really start to identify, the word identity, all of the authentic riches that God put into something, right? Goosebumps, strengths, desired, impact, the hierarchy of values and convictions that just seem to really resonate with people, right? Because if you ask, people questions like, what are your top five core values, or what are your, beliefs, right and wrong, and it's all different for people. Like if you rank those things, right? But there's a sense in each of us that we prioritize things over others because we're different people. But you put all of those things together, values, convictions, virtues, goosebumps, what breaks your heart, what lights you up, what causes you to laugh, what, all the stuff. It's amazing. Then when you start to identify that, you can really, you can start understanding the riches in somebody. And so then when you start calling out things like, hey, I saw you do this or that, it was good. Like
Well,
valid.
like you did with your son, that
Yeah.
you he got up one way and he turned himself around. You brought attention to that and
Yeah.
appreciated it.
And the validation, I think, is so important. Interestingly enough, I mean, after 27 years of marriage, Lisa and I just got done leading a re-engage marriage class at our church this last Sunday. And what was fascinating is this is our third time. And here's the funny thing, I'm still noticing things about her, in a leadership, facilitator role, because we're kind of co-leading this thing. That's really great. And so I remember on our last, class, we were kind of going through, just sitting in the living room talking through the questions and so on. And I didn't think anything of it, but I said, "Hey, I just noticed, this and this and this you said in our last class, and I just think that's fantastic. Thanks for doing that." Well, she brought it up a week later, and she's just said, "Hey, thanks for saying that. I'm really glad you saw that, and that meant a lot to me that you would actually see it and say something." So I think if you see something, say something. I think that,
Well, I was going to say something has a totally different meaning, but we need to be doing this.
yeah. But here's something else I think is maybe to one of your questions earlier here with regards to brokenness and all that kind of stuff. Why do people don't do it? So you know what? It takes a bit of vulnerability. It takes a bit of confidence to think of one's self that I am one that people respect enough to value, their opinion, or my opinion, as it were. I'm not saying that right. So for instance,
Mhm.
if you walk into a room, let's just say, just men in general, and you say, "Hey Jim, I want you to know yesterday," like you say it in front of the whole room, right? It takes a lot of guts for men to speak up in their, because we're always comparing ourselves to other people. There's always this macho hierarchy nonsense happening. And what we're longing for in a biblical perspective, Tim Keller says we're longing for the admiration of the admirable, right? We ultimately, what are we looking for? The applause of God. And so, but at the same time, the applause of someone that you respect, that changes you, right? Your dad, your uncle, a mentor, a coach, a pastor, or another colleague that is showing up every day and, trying to kill something and drag it home. So my point is this, though. If you walk into a room and you're like, you know what, I really need to encourage that guy, and you don't do it, why? It's because of insecurity. It's because,
Mm.
well, they probably don't value what I think anyway.
I might
Yeah.
embarrass them. No.
So it's a fascinating thing because if you have the courage to speak into somebody's life and say, Jim, I so appreciate the way that you led yesterday's meeting and conversation. You did it with such clarity and authority and kindness, man. Keep doing that. Well, what if that doesn't go well? What if he's like, okay, dude, fine. You know what? Well, odds of that happening are slim to none, right? Because everybody usually feels so insecure. Well, he would probably be like, David, man, thank you for saying that. That meant the world to me.
Right.
But it takes some vulnerability to be that person.
Absolutely. We could keep going. Like see something, say something is usually looking for bad stuff. And
Oh,
maybe
right.
if
Yeah.
we would look for good stuff, a man sees what he looks for,
Yeah.
finds what he looks for. If we see good, then we can say something. So we just need to look for the good.
Oh, yeah.
We so much to cover, but it's time to close. But before we close, do you have any parting words for our listeners? What takeaway do you want them to have?
I'll go back to maybe something I said earlier. Um, your life will not change unless you have the ability to believe that the God who made Neptune, and the Milky Way, and your son or daughter, or the Great Smoky Mountains, or Glacier National Park, or the Nile River, is the same God that made you, and He says, "You, my dear brother or sister, are my inheritance." And I have placed not only eternity in you, I've placed eternal value, on you. And I proved it by coming in the flesh and taking a seat on the floor so that you would have the head seat at the table. And when people realize that's whose image they are made in, and that's the value that has been placed on them and everybody around them, their life starts to change. But if you don't know that, and if you don't believe it with everything you have, you will become a never-ending vacuum that is just sucking up everything and everybody around you to fill that hole in your heart. And just the opposite happens then when you understand, man, I am priceless and God made me in his image for a specific reason, right? We've got a
Mm.
fingerprint, a retina, a DNA that is so unique, and your uniqueness is beautiful and wonderful and wonder filled, and it matters. And when you understand pricelessness and purpose, your whole life will change. Purpose is everything.
I love that. Yeah, Ephesians 2:10 is my favorite. Yes, because God made us so that we could do the things that he created for us to do that he
Yeah.
made before we even got here. So all
Yeah.
that stuff. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you so much to our amazing guest, David. Thank you.
Yeah.
And to our listeners, belongers.
Most importantly, yeah.
Yeah, stay connected, stay true to yourself, and always remember you belong. This is Dea Irby with Here Where You Belong podcast, signing off. Bye now.
Thanks for tuning in to Hear Where You Belong. We hope today's episode has inspired you to embrace the beauty of belonging in your own life. Remember, no matter where you are or where you're headed, you have a place where you truly belong. Join us again next time for more insightful conversations and heartwarming stories. Until then, stay connected, stay true to yourself, and always remember that you belong.